Welcome to Aspirations Over Hesitations, the podcast for high-achieving women whose ambitions are bigger than their fears. I'm your host, Alli Eldridge. As a mom, wife, and Fortune 500 company retiree, I know what it's like to wear many hats while still wanting more out of life. Whether it's stepping off the corporate ladder to lean into motherhood, healing yourself from chronic health issues to bring home that miracle baby, or launching your own business, you'll be inspired by stories of women who are going for the big things in life, in spite of anxiety that they too have experienced. Here, you'll find a community of moms who can relate to wanting what others say is impossible. They embrace alternative ways of thinking, working, and being, even when it comes with some uncertainty. One thing's for sure, if you want to live an unconventional, extraordinary life full of freedom and flexibility, you have to be willing to do things a little differently. Are you ready to say yes to choosing your aspirations over hesitations? Let's jump in. Hey everyone. In the last episode, I talked to you all about my journey into motherhood and how it was a multi-year journey that began with me having a miscarriage and then led me on this healing path that I took a lot of different actions to eventually conceive my son and have that healthy pregnancy. And that journey, while it was super, super hard, especially while I was in the thick of it, really taught me an important lesson. And that was clarity around my priorities. So it became abundantly clear to me that I had to focus first on my health, that if I wanted to become a mother, I had to do some work to heal. And then once I did that work to heal and I became a mother, that was my main priority. Like, I was a mother now. I had worked so hard to have this precious child and saw just how reliant he was on me and how important he was to me. And I had to find ways to really prioritize and protect the sacredness that is motherhood so that I could be my best self and continue being the type of present, happy, solid mother that I wanted to be for him, while also continuing to improve and better myself and go on to hopefully, eventually grow our family more as well. Today, I'm going to talk about how this healing journey was connected to my eventual exit in corporate. And I'm going to start by going back to after we had our son, when he was about 18 months, and we started to think about when might we want to have more babies. And I really started to think about, do I feel like I am ready at this time? Like, do I feel like my body is in good working order? Because I knew from the first experience that it was so important for my body to be in good working order to have a healthy pregnancy. And I didn't. Like, I noticed that there were some things going on that, while not as severe as they were several years prior, were still problematic. They were kind of annoying symptoms, a little bit of like red flag symptoms. And it was really frustrating to me because I had already done a lot of work to address those things. And the fact that they were coming back up now several years later, I just wanted to know like why and what I could do to go all in so that whatever protocol or plan that I followed the second go around, it would hopefully be the last go around, at least with those issues. And I wouldn't have to keep repeating this cycle every couple of years. And so I reached out to my functional medicine provider. We did some additional testing, and she came back with her plan for me, which, like always, was super detailed. And as I was reading through the pages and pages of this plan and her notes and her recommendations and some of the mentions of chronic stress and removing that, it was very clear to me that work was the root cause of my chronic stress. And when I say work, it wasn't just the job. I had a really good job. I loved my job. I loved the team that I worked with. I loved my boss. Like, I was not in some miserable, what you would label as like a super high stress, no flexibility job. Like, I had a good job. So it wasn't the job that I'm saying is the source of my chronic stress, but it was working and being in that traditional 9 to 5 corporate culture and the lifestyle that led me to have, while I also had a very young baby at home. And when I talk about lifestyle, I mean, y'all can probably relate to this, but I was eating the majority of my meals on the go in the car, commuting to and from the office, stuffing my face with whatever food I could grab quickly and easily in between meetings. Sometimes it was a meal, sometimes it was just a bar because I didn't have a lot of time to eat an actual meal. I knew that I was supposed to be doing things like preparing all of this healthy food at home and trying not to use the microwave and, using better for you pots and pans. But I just couldn't do those things when I was working, and it made it really hard. I even had a hard time with keeping up with taking like vitamins and supplements and drinking enough water and electrolytes. It was like when I was working, especially on the days that I had to go into the office, I was often faced with having to choose between, do I go to the bathroom, or do I refill my water, or do I go downstairs to get food, or do I go pump? I didn't have time to do all of those things. And so it was often quite literally a trade-off between, like, do I pee or do I pump? Do I use the bathroom or do I go and get food or water? And that just rushing and constant stress and hurry was not good for my body. And it was definitely showing up in different ways. I took a vacation in the fall, and this was a vacation that I was solely on PTO. Sometimes in the past, when I would go to Florida to visit my family, I would maybe work remote for some of it, part of it, all of it. And on this particular trip, I did not. I just was on vacation. I was just spending time with my family, and it was really good for me because I really was able to disconnect and fill my days with some other things that I found interesting and that ultimately gave me a lot of clarity to get out of corporate. So one thing that I did during that time, my mom and I went to it was a 3-day like finding your purpose workshop. And it wasn't all day. I think it was maybe 1 hour, an hour and a half for 3 days in a row. And it was kind of through this lens of like, as a woman, what were your ancestors faced with? What did the women in your lineage do? Like, what did they have available to them? And as you think about yourself and your life and the reason that you were put on this planet, what is your purpose? Like, what are the things that you're here to do that they couldn't or they didn't? And so that was really kind of like the tee up. And then we did some different meditations, visualizations with that backdrop. And it just became so clear to me during this time that my purpose was to help women spend more time with their children. And I know that sounds so simple and basic and even like, what? Like, how is that a job or how is that a purpose? But I realized that for people like my mom and my grandmother, it was very much it was just a different culture and a different time. And so women were often staying at home, preparing meals, doing laundry, doing kind of all of those traditional wife things, household things. In some cases, women worked, and that probably meant that they worked full-time, more traditional jobs. Maybe they were teachers or nurses, but there just wasn't this like online world where we could have more of an in-between, more of like a flexible way of working where we could still support our families, but also be present to lean into motherhood. And as I examined what I call like modern day motherhood in my own experience, and also the experiences of my friends and colleagues who were around similar ages and financial statuses, it just became clear to me that so many women were wanting what I call more, like they were wanting more time with their family, more freedom, more flexibility, but they didn't want to achieve that by having to do more. Like their plates were already so full. And so what could I do, leveraging the experiences that I had been through, some of which were very challenging, to help other mothers kind of find their way and land on solutions that worked for their families and also feel less alone when they were going through difficult times. So I had this vision, and there were other elements too that I won't get into here because some of them I'm still working on very much behind the scenes, but it became very clear to me what the vision was. What was a little less clear was like how. So even though I'm saying that I had this vision and I really could kind of start to see some dots connect that previously seemed unrelated, I still didn't know how I would be able to go from working in this full-time corporate job with a steady salary. I labeled it a steady salary at the time. Benefits, health insurance, all of those things that keep us stuck and feeling like there is not another way. I wasn't sure how I could break away from that. So even though I didn't have all the answers, I went ahead and shared my vision with my husband, including some of the details on what I would create and build over time. I would say like a 5-year plan. And I also shared with him what sounds like a really crazy thought, but it was something that came to me during one of these meditations. And that was, what if, we think that my job is providing this stable, steady, very high 6-figure salary, but what if instead, like, what if I think that my job is the smart financial move, staying in the job, but what if it's actually delaying us and me from being able to make so much more money? Because if I can help all of these women that I envision helping, there's probably a lot of other ways that income could come into our family rather than just relying on one employer, one salary, annual raises that are, small percentages. And it just really started to open my mind to the possibilities. I knew that I wanted the opportunity for me to stay at home, like now, not after the next baby, which is what we previously had talked about, but we weren't even pregnant. Like we weren't even at a place where we were going to start trying to get pregnant soon because I felt like I had more healing work to do. And so I didn't want to wait. And I didn't know exactly when, but I had started to feel like, when is it going to be my turn? Because for so many years earlier in our careers, when my husband and I were both like, we had our entry-level jobs and then we kind of started to both rise in our careers, like I had told him all along that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom one day. And so especially as I saw him start his own business and have some of the freedom and flexibility that comes with that, I really started to kind of have that resentment around, when is it going to be my turn? And, I didn't sign up for this. Like I didn't sign up for working forever. And I have been the breadwinner now, for many years earlier in our relationship. And I was really ready to like turn the tables and have him take that on so that I could focus on growing our family. Like I said, the vision sounds great, right? You want to leave your corporate job and you want to do it now. You want to do it in the next year. Like, sure, sounds awesome. But when it comes to the details, that was something that we still had to figure out. We had some ideas. My husband was really open to trying to get additional clients, raise fees, like do whatever he could do to start making up some of the money. But we certainly were not in a position where we just had large sums of money laying around that were not dedicated to other things that we could rely on at all. But what was really interesting is right after I had this vision, when I went back to work the following week, I was called into my boss's office and given some news. And this news had to do with an organizational change. And it was not at all like favorable for me, or my team, really, in my opinion. But definitely for me, it was super awkward. Like I was being layered, and it just felt like a really big slap in the face for everything that I had been working towards and all of kind of the development conversations and things that I had in mind for the future of the team. And so I didn't take it well. I think my boss knew that I wasn't going to take it well. I had some pretty unfiltered conversations with her as this news kind of sunk in, and I was open about how I was feeling, and she and I were really close, and so I felt like I could be open with her. But one of the things that she said was like, are you okay? Like, is everything all right with you and your health? And have you ever looked into taking a leave of absence? Like if you're feeling this way. And I hadn't. I'd heard of leaves of absence, but really more so for maternity leave or like severe surgeries or things like that people had. And once she said that, though, it really made me think like, okay, I'm going through this whole healing journey now again with my functional medicine provider, and she keeps pointing out like the chronic stress and how I have all of this anxiety and I can never heal fully without addressing that. Like maybe it's time for me to actually address that and lean into it. And so I pursued taking the leave of absence, which looking back, I do not think I would have pursued it if it hadn't been for this kind of big slap in the face change that made me realize that nobody was going to choose me. Like I had to choose me. And if my health was really a priority, like I just needed to pick me and do what I needed to do for myself and my family. And so I took the leave of absence. And if this is something that your company offers, I would highly suggest looking into it because it was the best few months of my life. I have never been in a situation where I wasn't hustling and working and in achiever mode, like trying to get something done, cross something else off the list. And I can remember talking to my therapist before my leave started, saying like, well, what do you think I should do while I'm on this leave? What should my days look like? And yeah, what should my schedule be? And she was like, you just need to be. Like, that's the point. Like, you shouldn't have a schedule. You shouldn't have all of these things that you're trying to do. You just need to be. You need to get into your body, out of your head. And at first, I didn't even know what that meant. Like, I was like, okay, I can try to do that, but I really have no idea what that means. It wasn't until I got into the leave that I started attempting some of that and then started to realize just how far away from that I was in my daily life. One of the realizations that I had during this time is that I realized I wasn't living a life that I consciously chose. Like, I chose my husband, I chose my house, I chose all of those things with intentionality. But when I looked at my career, I never said like, oh, I want to lead a communications team at a large company. Like that is my dream. That wasn't my dream. And I was good at it, yes. I liked it in ways. I did like it. I did love my team. I really, really did. But I did not set out in my life to be in that role. Like I did not think that that was my purpose. And that just really led me down this road of like a lot of the choices that I had made. It made it obvious to me that I was doing what was expected of me. I was following this path of going to college and getting internships and then getting paid internships and then applying for jobs. And I graduated college shortly after 2008, 2009, when it was so hard to get jobs. And so getting a job was like a really big deal. And if you could get a job, you got a job and you took it. And that's what I did. And corporate was really hard for me when I was in my early 20s. Like I had a lot of anxiety and panic attacks, and my body did not respond well to being in that environment. But I just tried to normalize it. I figured out ways to overcome it, even naturally. I told myself that I was, beyond it, and that I don't know, I guess I just got good at the game of rising through those corporate ranks. And I also acknowledge that I liked the promotions and the pay raises that came with being good at your job and getting those next opportunities. Like money was definitely something that was motivating to me. I wasn't working in the corporate world because I loved it so much. I was working in the corporate world because it paid the bills and it was exciting to me to figure out ways to continue growing my salary and my income. So even though I was in love with money, I also started to question, at what cost is all of this with my health and just the way that I'm feeling as a woman who is in the season now of having babies. And I just recognized the differences between like me and my husband. Yes, both of us worked, but when we were going through the miscarriage, and I did all of the work after that to try to make sure that it never happened again, and then went on to conceive our son and, labor and delivered him and did all the postpartum things. Like those weren't, my husband was with me, like emotionally, he was participating in all of this, but it wasn't like the full-time job that it was for me to try to prioritize all of those things while working full-time. And I just started to really recognize the importance of motherhood and healing and wanting to put that before making money and continuing to climb the corporate ladder. Because I also thought, if I look back on my life and I am not able to have the family that I want, but I've gotten to the top of the corporate ladder, like, am I going to be happy? And the answer was a big fat no. Like, I didn't even want to be at the top of the corporate ladder at all. There were people that are in those roles had to do all kinds of things that I had no desire to do personally. And while there was a lot of, in a way, sadness and grief that came with letting go of that old life or that old kind of picture of success, I realized that I had to let go of these things that had once served me really well. Like these were once things that I had manifested: the perfect job, the perfect boss, the perfect team. Like I manifested these things. I loved them. They served me really well for a season of my life, and then they weren't serving me well anymore. And to have to let go of that was hard. But I knew that I did have to kind of distance myself, even just mentally, to be able to get to what I ultimately desired on the other side. Going on the leave of absence taught me so many things, mostly that there was a whole world of women that were living amazing lives outside of a 9-to-5. I know it sounds really silly, but when you are in that world, you think that everybody else is too. And when you're not in it for more than just a week of vacation, but when you're not in it for several weeks in a row or several months in a row, and you are driving around town, you're going on errands, going to doctor's appointments, going to the grocery store, like whatever you need to do, and you see all of these other people that are doing the same thing, you realize, oh, everybody's not commuting to work, even though when I'm commuting to work, it feels like everybody's commuting to work, but they're actually not. Plenty of moms are working from home. They have their own businesses. They do lots of other things besides working for somebody else. And that was honestly eye-opening to me, that there was this whole big world outside of the 9 to 5. And I really started to get curious about those women and about what they were doing instead and how they were making it work. And instead of trying to just label them or judge them like, oh, well, she can do that because she's super wealthy or she has a rich husband. I don't know. I just started to think maybe that's not true. And maybe there are other ways. And these women have figured out how to make it work in a way that feels really aligned to them. When you're in it, you feel like it's the only way. You cannot see another way. You actually convince yourself that if you were to do anything else, that your family would struggle. And especially financially, your family would struggle. And that just feels awful and scary. And so, of course, you don't think of making a move. And it's one of those kind of woo-woo sayings, but it's like whatever you decide is true is true. Like if you decide that you can't make it work financially, that's true. If you decide that, maybe there is a way for me to make it work financially because now I'm observing all of these other women who have made it work financially, then it's also true. You are going to see what you want to see, and that includes the opportunities and the actions that you can take to make your dreams a reality. Taking leave of absence, while it was super scary and I did have to do a lot of paperwork, work with a medical professional to have all of the documentation that I needed, all of those things that are necessary, it was life-changing in all of the best ways. I don't think that I ever would have had the clarity that I got and the confidence that I got to resign if it weren't for that leave. Because when I was on the leave and I was experiencing the weightlessness of those days and just could see the contrast of how differently I felt about myself and my health and my body and my life when I wasn't trying to stuff all of these things into a single day, like there was no going back. I couldn't have gone back. It would have been miserable for me to try to go back. And so I knew while I was on the leave that I was going to have to figure out a way to make this work, because it was very clear to me that work was not good for my health, that it was, like I had hypothesized, the root of my chronic stress, and that I could not live the type of healthy, aligned lifestyle that I was seeking if I continued to be in a traditional full-time job. So I did plan to resign after the end of my leave. I'm very much a rule follower. I was going to go back, get reacquainted, give proper notice, have a transition plan, do all of the things that you're supposed to do. I did not want to leave my team having a hard time in any way. We actually had another member of the team who was getting ready to go on parental leave right after I got back, which I knew. And so I was going to even offer more than 2 weeks. Like if you wanted my transition plan to be longer than 2 weeks, that would have been totally fine. I just knew that long term it wasn't the right fit, and that I did need to take some of the learnings that I had from the leave and actually apply them to the remainder of my life. But before I could take action on any of that, I got the biggest surprise of my life. I was able to leave my corporate job without ever having to quit my corporate job. I'm going to say that again because I know it sounds kind of confusing and weird, but I was able to leave my corporate job without ever having to quit my corporate job. Does that sound too good to be true? If so, you're definitely going to want to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch part 2 of this story on episode 3. If you're considering leaving your corporate job, but you struggle to figure out what you would do instead, I highly recommend signing up for my free download, 4 ways that working moms can leverage their corporate jobs to find freedom for themselves. This guide is so helpful on how you can get the time to even think about some of these things, like finding your purpose and figuring out what you want to do, both in the short term and the long term. I know as a working mom, it can be really hard to even figure out when you have that time for some of this deeper work and these self-discovery questions. And so this guide will help you get creative on how you can use time and benefits that you already have to make the space that you need. It's available on my website, and I'll also link it in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would leave a review. I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.